5 Hidden Reasons Why You Keep Suffering. Buddhist wisdom explained. Human suffering is as old as existence itself. It does not discriminate by age, wealth, nationality, or belief. It is the undercurrent of human life, often misunderstood yet essential to the awakening of consciousness. In Buddhist philosophy, suffering, or dukkha, is not seen merely as pain or sadness. It is the very dissatisfaction woven into the fabric of existence. It is the feeling that something is always missing, that life is never quite as it should be. You may have moments of joy, success, and peace, but beneath them lies an uneasy awareness that all things change, all things fade, and all attachments eventually dissolve. Why do you keep suffering? Why do the same emotional patterns return again and again, even when you try to change your life, your surroundings, your relationships, or even your beliefs? The truth is that suffering does not arise from the world outside, it is born from within. The Buddha did not promise to eliminate the pain of existence. He taught how to transcend it by seeing through its illusions. This journey begins not with denial or escape, but with insight, with a clear understanding of what suffering really is and where it comes from. Many people spend their lives fighting symptoms while never facing the roots. They chase pleasure to avoid pain, pursue control to resist uncertainty, and seek validation to cover the void of self-ignorance. Yet every attempt to run away from suffering only deepens it. The only way out is through. Buddhist wisdom does not offer comfort in the ordinary sense. It offers awakening. It calls you to see clearly that your suffering is not punishment, nor is it meaningless. It is your greatest teacher, the mirror that reveals your attachments, your illusions, and your forgotten nature. Every form of suffering is an invitation to return home, to the stillness of the present moment where peace already exists, untouched by gain or loss. In this exploration, we will uncover 5 hidden reasons why you keep suffering. These are not the obvious ones, not simply desire, anger, or ignorance, but the subtle mechanisms of the mind that keep you trapped in cycles of inner pain. Understanding them is not merely intellectual, it is transformational. As you recognize each one within yourself, suffering begins to dissolve on its own because truth has that power to liberate without struggle. Let us walk through these truths together, slowly and consciously. Each insight is a mirror, each reflection is a step toward freedom. You suffer because you resist reality. The first and most profound source of human suffering lies in resistance. Life unfolds moment by moment, yet the mind constantly argues with what is. You want the world to conform to your preferences, but existence is indifferent to them. You wish the past were different, the future more certain, and the present more comfortable. This gap between what you want and what is, this friction, is the birthplace of suffering. Buddhism teaches that the mind, in its ignorance, believes it can control life. It clings to the illusion that happiness depends on favorable conditions, and that peace will come once everything aligns with its desires. But this never happens, because reality is not personal. The river of existence flows according to causes and conditions far beyond our control. The more you try to dam it, the more pain you feel. Resistance takes many forms: denial, anger, blame, self-pity, and even spiritual bypassing. The attempt to mask discomfort with positive thinking or forced calmness. Yet deep within, resistance is always a no to what is happening. It is the refusal to let life be as it is. When something unpleasant arises, you tense up. When you lose something you value, you fight internally against the loss. This inner rebellion creates layers of mental suffering far greater than the external event itself. Imagine a person standing in the ocean, trying to push back the waves. Every time one approaches, they brace themselves, tense their body and push against the water. Soon they are exhausted, angry, and fearful of the next wave. but another person standing in the same ocean allows the waves to come and go. They move with them, not against them. One suffers, the other flows. The difference is not the waves, it is the resistance. The Buddha often said, "What you resist persists." This is not mystical. It is psychological truth. Resistance feeds the very energy it tries to suppress. When you resist pain, you strengthen the identity of the one who is in pain. When you resist uncertainty, you become consumed by anxiety. When you resist impermanence, you live in fear of loss. Letting go of resistance does not mean apathy or surrendering to injustice. It means aligning with reality instead of arguing with it. The mind resists because it confuses acceptance with approval. You think that if you accept something, you must like it. But acceptance is simply the recognition that what is, is. You can only change reality after you have first accepted it. Otherwise, your energy is divided between what you want to do and what you refuse to feel. Consider pain, physical or emotional. The natural response of the body is to tense up around pain, to resist it. Yet this tension multiplies the suffering. The moment you relax into the experience, observe it without judgment, the quality of pain changes. It becomes sensation, alive, dynamic, and often less unbearable. This is why meditation is not about escaping discomfort, but sitting with it. Every moment of resistance is a lost opportunity for awakening. When you stop fighting life, something miraculous happens. Peace arises not because circumstances change, but because you stop demanding that they must. You no longer waste energy controlling the uncontrollable. You learn to meet reality as it is, raw, vivid, and alive. And in that meeting, suffering loses its ground. To live without resistance is to live in harmony with the law of impermanence. It is to understand that joy and sorrow are two movements of the same dance, and both pass. It is to open yourself to the full spectrum of human experience without shrinking away. The enlightened mind does not seek pleasure or avoid pain. It flows with the rhythm of existence. This acceptance is not weakness, it is supreme strength. It takes courage to face life without filters, to allow the heart to break open and stay open. When you resist, you contract. When you accept, you expand. The expansion itself is healing. To begin dissolving suffering, observe where in your life you are saying no. Where do you argue with the present moment? Notice the tension in your body when something doesn't go as planned. Instead of reacting, breathe. Let the breath remind you that everything arises and passes away. You don't need to control the tide, you only need to float. Suffering ends, not when life stops being painful, but when you stop being in conflict with it. The world remains unpredictable, but you no longer fight it. You trust the unfolding, even when you don't understand it. That is liberation, not escape from life, but peace within it. If this reflection resonates with you, subscribe to the channel for more Buddhist wisdom that guides you toward freedom and inner calm. You suffer because you are attached to what must change. At the heart of the Buddha's realization was a single, undeniable truth. Everything changes, nothing remains fixed, nothing endures in the same form for even a moment. The body ages, emotions rise and fall, relationships evolve, seasons turn, and even the stars in the sky burn and fade. Impermanence is not an occasional condition of life, it is its fundamental nature. And yet the human mind clings, it grasps desperately at what it loves and resists what it dislikes. Trying to freeze a river that never stops flowing. This clinging is the second hidden reason for your suffering. Attachment to what must change. Attachment is not love. Love flows freely. Attachment grasps. Love embraces what is. Attachment demands that it stay. The mind, afraid of loss, tries to build walls around what it finds pleasurable, around people, possessions, achievements, or states of mind. You become attached to praise, to success, to a particular identity, to an image of yourself, or even to your pain because it has become familiar. But in the world of constant transformation, to attach is to invite suffering. Because whatever you cling to will change, and when it does, you will hurt. Buddhism calls this upadana, the act of clinging. It is born from desire, tanha, which arises from ignorance, avidya, the ignorance that anything can truly belong to you. The truth is that nothing belongs to you, not even your body or your thoughts. They are borrowed for a short time from the universe. They appear, they serve their purpose, and they dissolve back into the great movement of existence. The problem is not that things change. The problem is that you keep expecting them not to. Think of a flower. You see it bloom, radiant and alive, and your heart delights. But if you try to hold it forever, it will wither in your hands. The natural course of beauty is to arise and pass. The same is true for every joy, every person, every moment. When you understand impermanence deeply, you stop grasping at what is passing and start cherishing it while it's here. You stop confusing love with possession and learn that appreciation is the highest form of love. The root of attachment is fear, the fear of emptiness. You believe that without the things or people you cling to, you will be incomplete. The ego constructs its identity from attachments. My success, my partner, my reputation, my beliefs, my story. When those attachments are threatened, the ego trembles because it senses its own fragility. The more you build your sense of self upon external forms, the more fragile your happiness becomes. A single change in circumstances can destroy your inner peace because it strikes at the illusion of who you think you are. You can see this in relationships. When love is mixed with attachment, it becomes ownership. You begin to measure love in terms of how much control you have over another person's affection or attention. You suffer not because they change, but because you refuse to allow them to. You become trapped in the demand that they remain as they were when you first felt safe or desired. But life does not grant such guarantees. People grow, drift, and sometimes depart. The one who truly understands impermanence loves without clinging and grieves without despair. Attachment also manifests in your attachment to pleasure and aversion to pain. The mind wants to hold on to what feels good and push away what feels bad. Yet both pleasure and pain are waves in the same ocean. They rise, peak, and fade. To cling to pleasure is to chase a mirage. To resist pain is to tighten the knot of suffering. The Buddha saw that happiness rooted in impermanent things is itself impermanent. True peace must therefore be found in something beyond the conditions that change, in awareness itself, the silent witness to all experience. The more deeply you look, the more you see that every attachment is a demand for life to conform to your will. You want the weather to be pleasant, people to be kind, your body to be strong, your plans to succeed. When reality doesn't match these desires, frustration arises. But it is not reality that is cruel. It is your attachment to how you want things to be. The mind constantly bargains with life. I will be happy when I have this, when I achieve that, when this problem ends. But by the time one desire is fulfilled, another takes its place. The cycle of craving and disappointment never stops because it is rooted in the misunderstanding that peace lies outside you. Freedom begins when you stop tying your happiness to impermanent things. This doesn't mean you stop caring or enjoying life. It means you stop depending on it for your inner peace. You can appreciate without possessing, participate without controlling, and love without fearing loss. This is the meaning of non-attachment, not indifference, but intimacy with life as it is. A person who is free of attachment enjoys everything yet needs nothing. This teaching can be difficult to grasp because the modern world conditions you to attach as proof of meaning. Advertisements, relationships, and even spiritual movements encourage you to find your purpose, find your soulmate, find your passion, always something to hold on to. But the awakened one does not find meaning by grasping, they discover it by letting go. The more you release, the more you see that the essence of life is already whole. You don't need to decorate it with attachments to make it valuable. Consider how much of your pain arises from trying to keep things the same. The longing for how it used to be, the anxiety of what if it changes, the grief of why did it end. All these are echoes of attachment. Even memories can bind you when you worship them. To carry the past into the present is to burden yourself with ghosts. The Buddha advised his disciples to live like a lotus in muddy water, surrounded by the changing world, yet untouched by its stains. The lotus does not cling to the mud beneath it, nor does it seek permanence in the sunlight. It simply blooms and lets each day pass. To dissolve attachment, you must begin with awareness. Notice what you cling to most fiercely. Is it an idea of success, a relationship, an image of who you think you are? Observe the fear that arises when you imagine losing it. That fear is your teacher. Sit with it without running away. Ask yourself, who would I be without this? As you watch closely, you will see that the one who clings is not the real you. It is the ego. The illusion of separateness that depends on attachments to exist. Meditation reveals this truth experientially. When you sit in stillness, thoughts and sensations come and go. Some are pleasant, some painful. If you cling to any of them, you suffer. But if you let them rise and fall like clouds, peace emerges naturally. The same law applies to life. The secret is not to control the clouds, but to rest as the sky. There is a profound paradox at the heart of letting go. The moment you stop clinging, you become truly connected. Non-attachment does not mean withdrawal from life. It means participating fully without chains. It means loving deeply, but knowing that even love must flow, evolve, and eventually dissolve into the whole. The awakened one weeps when loss comes, but does not despair, for they know that nothing truly dies, it only changes form. Impermanence can seem cruel when you look through the eyes of attachment, but it is merciful when you see through the eyes of wisdom. Because everything changes, healing is possible. Because nothing lasts forever, even pain passes. Every dawn owes its beauty to the fact that night does not endure. When you stop fighting impermanence, you begin to see its grace. The more you live in harmony with change, the lighter you become. You move through life like a traveler who enjoys every landscape but carries no heavy luggage. You are grateful for each experience, but not enslaved by it. When joy comes, you smile. When sorrow visits, you bow. In both, you find the same still awareness, watching silently, untouched by the waves. The mind fears letting go because it imagines emptiness as loss. But the emptiness the Buddha spoke of, shunyata, is not voidness, but spaciousness. It is the infinite field from which all experiences arise. When you drop attachments, you don't lose life, you gain the whole of it. Your heart becomes vast enough to hold both joy and grief without being shattered by either. To practice non-attachment is to practice trust. Trust that life gives you what you need for awakening, not necessarily what you want for comfort. Every loss, every change, every ending carries hidden wisdom. The person who clings says, "Why is this happening to me?" The one who lets go asks, "What is this trying to teach me?" One suffers, the other grows. Eventually, you come to see that all attachments, even to spiritual progress, must be released. The desire for enlightenment can become just another craving if you grasp it as a goal. True liberation is not the achievement of the ego, but the dissolution of it. when nothing is clung to, not even awakening itself. Freedom is complete. The journey of detachment is gradual. At first, it feels like dying, because parts of your identity fall away. The old patterns that defined you begin to crumble. But what dies is not you. It is the illusion of ownership, the false self that claimed things as mine. In the quiet that follows, you discover something unchanging, awareness itself, pure and vast. It has never clung to anything because it is the space in which all things appear and disappear. To live from this awareness is to live free. You can love without fear, lose without bitterness, and act without attachment to results. You realize that you are not the waves but the ocean. The waves come and go, but the ocean remains. Once you know this, suffering becomes less personal. Pain still visits, but it no longer defines you. You understand that every rise and fall is just another movement of the great dance. So why do you keep suffering? Because you keep trying to make the impermanent permanent. You keep believing that something outside you can complete you. You keep fighting the flow. The key is not to renounce the world, but to renounce clinging. When you hold the world lightly, it becomes beautiful again. Not because it lasts, but because you finally see its sacred transience. The Buddha compared life to a dewdrop on a leaf, glistening at sunrise. It is breathtaking precisely because it will soon vanish. The wise do not weep over its passing. They bow in gratitude for its brief sparkle. The tragedy is not that life changes, but that you spend so much of it trying to stop the change. Letting go is not an act of will, but of understanding. When you truly see that clinging causes pain, the grip naturally loosens. You don't force yourself to release. You awaken from the illusion that there was ever anything to hold. That is why Buddhist wisdom is not about belief, but about insight. You cannot argue your way into peace. You must see directly how the mind creates suffering through attachment. This seeing is freedom, and freedom, once tasted, cannot be forgotten. You begin to live lightly, love deeply, and walk gently upon the earth. You no longer demand that life give you anything. You meet it with open hands, knowing that what comes will go, and what goes will return in another form. To suffer less, love more, but love without chains. Appreciate everything, cling to nothing. Let change be your teacher, not your enemy. Then every moment, no matter how fleeting, becomes a doorway to peace. If this message touched you, subscribe to the channel to continue this journey into Buddhist wisdom and the art of letting go. You suffer because you mistake thoughts for truth. Human beings are prisoners of their own minds. They live within invisible walls built by their thoughts, convinced that these walls define reality. Every belief, every judgment, every assumption becomes a brick. And because the mind never stops talking, you rarely notice the confinement. You mistake the noise for truth, the commentary for the world itself. Yet the Buddha's teaching is radically simple. What you think is not what is. The mind is a storyteller, not a mirror. It narrates, it interprets, it distorts. When you take its stories as truth, you suffer. When you see them as stories, you begin to awaken. From the moment you wake up, thought begins. It tells you who you are, what your life means, what is good, bad, desirable, or dangerous. You don't see things as they are. You see them through the veil of concepts. Someone says a word, and your mind immediately reacts, interpreting, judging, comparing. You call one thing success and another failure. One person friend and another enemy. These labels seem natural, but they are learned habits of perception. Beneath them lies pure experience, raw, silent, unfiltered. Thought arises on top of it like waves upon the sea. The problem begins when you forget that thought is only a representation. Like a map mistaken for the territory, thought is never reality itself. It points to something, but it isn't the thing. The word fire cannot burn you, but the real flame can. The concept love cannot make your heart race, but the presence of someone you care for can. Yet the mind spends most of its life in concepts, not in direct experience. It becomes lost in its own creations, and because it mistakes them for truth, it suffers when they clash with reality. Buddhist philosophy identifies this confusion as one of the roots of ignorance, avidya, not seeing things as they are. The mind projects its fears, desires, and memories onto the world, then reacts to those projections as if they were facts. You suffer because you do not experience reality. You experience your thoughts about reality. When someone criticizes you, for example, what hurts is not the sound of their words, but the story your mind tells. They disrespected me. I'm not good enough. They shouldn't treat me this way. The pain comes from the interpretation, not the event. The same is true for anxiety. The future does not exist, yet your mind creates endless scenarios, most of which never happen, and your body reacts as if they were real. The heart races, the stomach tightens, sleep disappears. You live in a film projected by your own thoughts, mistaking imagination for evidence. In truth, nothing is happening except thinking. But because you identify with thought, you suffer the emotions it generates. The Buddha taught that the mind is like a monkey, constantly jumping from branch to branch. It grabs one thought, then another, restless and unsatisfied. Meditation is the art of watching this monkey without following it. When you observe your thoughts instead of becoming them, a profound shift occurs. You realize you are not the mind. You are the awareness that sees the mind. And in that realization, the power of thought to control you begins to dissolve. The difference between being lost in thought and being aware of thought is the difference between dreaming and waking. When you are lost, thoughts seem real, urgent, and personal. When you are aware, you see them for what they are, passing clouds in the vast sky of consciousness. This simple recognition is liberation. It does not mean thoughts disappear. It means you are no longer enslaved by them. Most of your suffering arises because you believe the narratives your mind tells. The mind says, I am a failure, and you feel despair. It says, this should not have happened, and you feel anger. It says, I will never be happy, and you feel fear. But what is the mind, really? It is a collection of memories, impressions, and habits, a survival tool evolved to protect the body. It is useful for solving problems, but it is not a reliable guide to truth. The mind's job is to categorize, compare, and anticipate, not to understand the mystery of existence. When you expect it to explain life, it can only create confusion. Thought can describe, but it cannot experience. You can think about love endlessly, but that thinking will never give you the warmth of being embraced. You can analyze the taste of a mango, but the description will never touch your tongue. The direct experience of life happens before thought, in the silence of awareness. To live in harmony with reality, you must return to that silence again and again until you learn to trust it more than the mind's commentary. The Buddha's invitation is not to stop thinking, but to stop believing every thought. Belief gives thoughts weight and solidity. Disbelief exposes their emptiness. When you see a thought arise, I am not enough, they don't respect me, my life is ruined, simply look at it without judgment. Ask, is it true right now in direct experience? Often, you will find that the suffering exists only in the thought, not in reality. This practice is subtle, but transformative. Over time, you begin to notice how many of your thoughts contradict each other. One moment the mind says, I want to be alone. The next, I hate being lonely. One day it says, I'll be happy when I succeed. And when success comes, it says, it's not enough. A doom. How can such a contradictory instrument define truth? Seeing its inconsistency, you begin to take it less seriously. You start laughing at the mind's tricks, and laughter itself becomes liberation. There is a story in Zen about a student who approached his master, troubled by his thoughts. "My mind will not stop talking," he said. "It is full of noise and confusion." The master replied, "Bring me your mind, and I will silence it." The student searched but could not find his mind. Finally he said, "I cannot find it." The master smiled and said, "Then I have already silenced it." The mind cannot be found because it has no independent existence. It is a movement of energy, a habit of perception. Once you see this, its authority collapses. But the mind resists this realization because it thrives on control. It wants certainty, it wants answers, it wants to define. It says, "If I don't think, I will lose myself." Yet the self it fears losing is precisely the illusion created by thought. When thought stops, even for a moment, what remains is not emptiness but peace, a vast stillness that feels more real than anything the mind could imagine. That stillness is who you truly are. In everyday life, this understanding transforms your relationship with emotion. Every emotion is preceded by a thought, even if subtle. Anger arises when you think something is unfair. Fear arises when you imagine something terrible happening. Sadness arises when you interpret an event as loss. If you can see the thought before the emotion crystallizes, you can interrupt the chain of suffering. You realize that you are not angry because of what happened, but because of what you think about what happened. This is not denial, it is clarity. For example, imagine someone cuts you off in traffic. The event itself lasts a second, yet you might replay it for hours, telling yourself stories. People are so selfish. I could have died. The world is full of idiots. The body tightens, anger burns, and suffering grows. Not because of the event, but because you keep feeding it with thought. If you could witness the thought arise and let it go, the emotion would dissolve like smoke in the air. Thoughts also bind you through comparison. The mind measures everything, yourself against others, the present against the past, what you have against what you lack. But comparison is endless because there will always be someone richer, smarter, or more attractive. The Buddha pointed out that comparison is a form of greed and delusion. It keeps you trapped in a world of better and worse, success and failure, high and low. Yet life itself knows nothing of these divisions. A mountain does not compare itself to another. A flower does not envy the sun. Only the human mind does this, and in doing so, it suffers. Another subtle form of mental suffering arises from identification with thought, the belief that I am my thoughts. But thoughts are transient, they come and go. If you were your thoughts, you would cease to exist every time one disappeared. Clearly, something remains. That something is awareness. Awareness witnesses thoughts but is not touched by them. It is like the sky watching clouds drift by. Some clouds are dark and heavy, others light and white, but the sky remains unchanged. The moment you remember you are the sky, the clouds lose their power. The practice of mindfulness trains this remembering. Each time you notice a thought without following it, you strengthen awareness. Each time you return to the breath, you return to the present moment, which is free from the mind's stories. Over time, you begin to see thought as just another sense perception, like sound or smell. You no longer treat it as an authority, just another passing phenomenon. The irony is that the mind itself is not the enemy. Thought is a tool, sharp and useful when handled consciously, dangerous when it handles you. The goal is not to destroy thought, but to see it clearly. When thought serves awareness, it becomes creativity, insight, and compassion. When awareness serves thought, it becomes delusion, fear, and conflict. The key is who is master and who is servant. You will notice that the mind constantly seeks certainty. It wants to label everything so it can feel safe. But reality cannot be captured by concepts. Words divide what is indivisible. They carve the seamless whole of existence into fragments, good and bad, me and you, life and death. The Buddha described this as dualistic thinking, the root of conflict. When you see beyond duality, you see that opposites are not enemies but complements. Life and death, joy and sorrow, gain and loss are two sides of one coin. The mind separates them. Wisdom unites them. When thought quiets, you begin to experience the world directly. Colors seem brighter, sounds clearer, presence deeper. You realize that most of life's richness was hidden behind the veil of thinking. You begin to live, not merely think about living. And in that directness, suffering diminishes because you are no longer lost in interpretations. Of course, the mind will not surrender easily. It will insist that thinking is necessary for survival, that without planning and analyzing, everything will fall apart. But notice that life already happens without your interference. The heart beats, the breath flows, the earth spins, all without your command. The same intelligence that moves the planets moves you. When you trust that intelligence more than your anxious mind, peace begins to take root. Many spiritual traditions speak of beginner's mind, the state of openness that sees things freshly, without preconceptions. In that state, a simple act like drinking water or watching the rain becomes sacred. You taste life directly, without the filter of thought. You are no longer a thinker, you are being itself. When you stop identifying with thoughts, the idea of problems changes. What you once called a problem was often just resistance to what is. Without the mental story, most problems dissolve into actions or acceptance. You either do something or you don't, but you stop suffering in between. The energy once trapped in overthinking becomes available for clarity and compassion. Over time, this awareness begins to radiate into every corner of your life. You speak with more patience because you no longer react to every thought of offense. You listen more deeply because you are not busy preparing a mental reply. You love more freely because you are not imprisoned by stories of past hurt. The mind still speaks, but you listen to it the way you would to a passing radio, noticing but not obeying. Eventually, even the thought, "I am aware," dissolves. Awareness no longer needs to name itself. You live as silence moving through noise. You act spontaneously, guided not by analysis, but by direct perception of what is needed. This is the true intelligence, not of the mind, but of the heart, which sees unity where thought sees separation. In the final understanding, thought and suffering are linked only by identification. The mind will continue its chatter as long as the body lives, but you no longer take it personally. It becomes background music. You might even enjoy it, knowing it cannot touch the stillness at your core. That stillness is the essence of all Buddhist practice, not a state to achieve, but your natural condition when the storm of thought subsides. When you awaken to this, even suffering itself is seen differently. You see that pain is real, but suffering, the mental struggle against pain, is optional. Suffering is what happens when thought says, "This should not be." Without that thought, there is only sensation, experience, life unfolding. The mind turns pain into identity. I am the one who was hurt. Awareness lets pain arise and pass without story. This is why enlightened beings can feel deep compassion without personal sorrow. They see suffering but are not bound by it. To live this way is to live awake. You still think, plan, and remember, but you know these are movements within you, not you yourself. You walk through the world like a lucid dreamer, aware that the images are temporary, yet participating fully in their beauty. You speak and act, but from silence. You love, but without possession. You suffer, but without despair. In truth, the only thing that has ever bound you is thought. The only jailer has been your own mind, and the key has always been in your pocket, awareness. Once you see this, you cannot be deceived again. Thought may arise, but you smile at it as an old friend, knowing its tricks. The world continues to turn, but you are free within it. You no longer chase peace, you embody it. You no longer seek enlightenment. You live from the light that was never gone. The mind becomes transparent, and through it, reality shines with quiet brilliance. This is the end of confusion, the end of self-created suffering. You are home, here and now, beyond thought, beyond fear, beyond the restless searching for answers that were never outside you. If this reflection helped you see your mind more clearly, subscribe to the channel to continue exploring Buddhist wisdom and the path to inner peace. You suffer because you seek happiness in external things. From childhood, you were taught that happiness waits somewhere outside you. It lives, you were told, in future achievements, in possessions, in the recognition of others, in romance, in wealth, in safety. Your parents, teachers, society, and even religion reinforced the same belief. Do this, become that, and you will finally be happy. The human mind absorbed this conditioning so deeply that it became a reflex. Every action, every ambition, every desire carries this hidden hope that something out there will complete you. Yet the more you chase, the farther happiness seems to move away, like a horizon that recedes as you walk toward it. The Buddha saw this clearly 25 centuries ago and called it tanha, craving born of ignorance. He realized that as long as you seek satisfaction in things that change, suffering will follow you like a shadow. Look at your life honestly. How many times have you said, if only I had this, if only they loved me, if only I achieved that, then I would be content. And each time the wish was fulfilled, joy arrived, but only for a moment. The new car loses its shine, the relationship settles into routine, the applause fades, the vacation ends. Desire then shifts its target, whispering again, just one more thing. This endless movement of wanting and acquiring is not life's fault. It is the mind's misunderstanding of what happiness is. True happiness cannot be possessed, because what can be possessed can also be lost. Everything external, wealth, youth, reputation, comfort, is impermanent. To depend on them for peace is to build a house on sand. The modern world magnifies this delusion. Advertising and social media feed a constant hunger for more success, more beauty, more followers, more experiences. The collective mind equates stimulation with fulfillment, but stimulation is only excitement, and excitement always collapses into restlessness. When the high fades, emptiness returns, sharper than before, and the search begins again. The Buddha compared this to drinking salt water to quench thirst. The more you drink, the thirstier you become. What makes this cycle so painful is that the object of desire is never the real issue. The suffering lies in the grasping, in the belief that something must happen for you to be complete. The moment you believe that your happiness depends on external conditions, you surrender your freedom. You become a beggar in the marketplace of life, waiting for circumstances to be kind. When they are not, you despair. But reality is indifferent to your expectations. It flows according to causes and conditions, far beyond your control. That is why the Buddha called worldly happiness dukkha sukha, pleasure laced with suffering. It tastes sweet, but soon turns bitter. To understand this deeply, imagine two people watching a sunset. One is at peace, absorbed in the beauty, grateful for the moment. The other, though seeing the same colors, is anxious that the light will fade, taking photos to preserve it, wishing it would last longer. The first enjoys, the second suffers. The difference is not in the sunset, but in the attachment of the observer. External events do not cause suffering. Dependence on them for happiness does. The Buddha's insight was radical. Happiness is not something you get. It is something you are when craving stops. The stillness that remains when grasping ceases is not dull or lifeless. It is pure aliveness, free from fear and lack. It does not depend on praise or success because it springs from awareness itself. When you sit quietly and watch your breath without needing the moment to be different, you taste that peace. It is subtle at first, like a faint fragrance carried by the wind. But as the mind quiets, it grows unmistakable. You realize that happiness has been with you all along, veiled only by restless seeking. Why then do you continue to look outward? Because the mind is addicted to becoming. It cannot accept that fulfillment might lie in stillness. It wants movement, achievement, proof. It tells you that happiness earned through effort is more valuable than the quiet joy that arises when you stop struggling. Yet every chase eventually ends in exhaustion. The Buddha called this the weariness of samsara, the endless wandering from one satisfaction to the next. When you finally tire of the chase, a new possibility opens. The discovery that the peace you sought outside has always been your own nature. This does not mean withdrawing from the world or rejecting pleasure. The Buddha never condemned beauty, love, or comfort. He simply pointed out their limits. When you enjoy a meal, a song, or the company of a friend without clinging to it, pleasure becomes a celebration rather than a chain. You savor the moment fully, knowing it will pass, and because you do not demand permanence, the passing does not wound you. Non-attachment transforms ordinary experience into gratitude. The flower's fragility makes it precious. The sunset's brevity makes it sacred. The mind, however, keeps inventing conditions. I will be happy when I am successful, when I am enlightened, when I am respected. But happiness tied to conditions is fragile because conditions change. The Buddha's freedom lies in the unconditioned, nibbana, the extinguishing of craving. It is not annihilation, but the cooling of the fire of wanting. When the fire burns out, what remains is serenity. Nothing is missing, nothing needs to be added. In practical life, this understanding grows through awareness. Each time you notice desire arising, the urge to check your phone, to win an argument, to buy something, pause and look beneath it. What feeling drives it? Usually it is a subtle discomfort, boredom, insecurity, loneliness. The mind believes that satisfying the desire will remove the discomfort. But if you stay with the feeling instead of obeying it, you discover that it dissolves on its own. The desire was only a distraction from the deeper restlessness. When you stop running, the restlessness reveals its nature, energy seeking freedom. By not feeding it, you liberate it. Gradually, you learn to distinguish pleasure from peace. Pleasure is excitement. Peace is contentment. Pleasure depends on circumstances. Peace arises from acceptance. Pleasure comes and goes. Peace abides. The world can give pleasure but not peace, because peace is not an experience. It is the background of all experiences. When you remember this, you move through life differently. You still pursue goals, but not out of desperation. You still love, but without neediness. You still enjoy success, but without fear of failure. The center of gravity shifts from the external to the internal. The Buddha illustrated this with the parable of the poisoned arrow. A man struck by an arrow refuses treatment until he knows who shot it, what kind of wood it's made of, and why. He dies before finding the answers. Similarly, the human mind wastes its life chasing explanations and external cures, while the real problem, craving, remains unexamined. The arrow of suffering can be removed only by seeing the craving itself, not by rearranging circumstances. To seek happiness outside is to give the world power over you. You become elated when praised, crushed when blamed, inflated by success, deflated by failure. Your mood rises and falls like a leaf in the wind. But when happiness is rooted in awareness, praise and blame touch only the surface. The core remains still. The Buddha described the enlightened mind as unshakable like a mountain, not because it is cold or indifferent, but because it no longer depends on the weather of the world. Think of how many compromises people make in the name of happiness, working jobs they hate, pretending to be someone they're not, staying in hollow relationships, all because they believe peace lies just around the corner. But even when they reach that corner, peace is not there because it was never absent to begin with. The tragedy of human life is not that we fail to find happiness. It is that we search for it where it cannot be found. When you understand this, the chase begins to slow. You start turning inward, not as escape, but as return. Meditation becomes a homecoming, the rediscovery of the quiet joy that doesn't depend on anything. Sitting in stillness, you see that the same awareness that watches thoughts and sensations is already complete. It does not need improvement, it does not need achievement, it simply is, and within that being there is peace deeper than all pleasure. As insight deepens, gratitude replaces craving. Instead of demanding more from life, you start appreciating what is already given. Breath, sunlight, the taste of water, the presence of being alive. Each moment becomes enough. In that simplicity, joy blooms naturally. This is not the ecstatic joy of getting what you want. It is the serene joy of not needing anything to be different. The Buddha sometimes described enlightenment as the end of shopping, not literally but symbolically, the end of seeking. Once you know that fulfillment is not in the next thing, the mind relaxes. You participate in the world without attachment, using things without being used by them. Wealth becomes a tool, not a trap. Relationships become expressions of love, not strategies for security. Work becomes service, not self-definition. In every activity, you act freely because nothing can add or subtract from your essence. This understanding does not remove pain from life, but it removes the fear of pain. You no longer demand constant pleasure. You accept the full spectrum of experience. In doing so, paradoxically, you become happier than ever before because nothing is excluded. You can cry without resistance, laugh without clinging, and meet each moment with open hands. Gradually, this detachment matures into compassion. When you no longer seek happiness in externals, you stop competing and start understanding. You see others chasing illusions as you once did, and your heart softens. You want to help, not judge. You share, because there is no scarcity in your being. Generosity replaces greed, kindness replaces envy, peace replaces ambition. This is not morality imposed from outside, but wisdom flowering from within. The mind may ask, if I stop seeking, won't life lose its meaning? On the contrary, life gains meaning. When you no longer use the world to fill a void, you begin to see its beauty clearly. Ordinary things glow with quiet wonder, the sound of rain, the warmth of sunlight, the laughter of a child. You realize that meaning was never in the object, it was in the awareness beholding it. When you are present, even the simplest act becomes sacred. To rest in inner contentment is not laziness, it is alignment with reality. Action still happens, perhaps more effectively, but now it arises from clarity, not from craving. You respond instead of react, you give instead of grab, you flow instead of fight. The world remains the same, yet everything changes because the center of perception has shifted from the restless mind to the still heart. In the end, all suffering from external seeking can be traced to one illusion, the belief that you are separate from life. You think happiness is something to be gained by the individual self, but when the illusion of separateness dissolves, you see that life itself is joy, that the universe is not withholding happiness from you. It is happiness expressing itself through infinite forms. The wave does not need to capture the ocean, it is the ocean moving. When you realize this, the restless search ends. You are already home. When the Buddha attained enlightenment under the Bodhi tree, he did not find something new, he awoke to what had always been. The same awakening waits within you. Every time you stop chasing, every time you rest in awareness, every time you allow life to be as it is, the veil thins. What remains is simple, silent, boundless peace. Not the fragile pleasure of the world, but the unshakable serenity of the heart that needs nothing to be whole. If this reflection reminded you to look within rather than outside, subscribe to the channel to continue exploring Buddhist wisdom and the path to true happiness. You suffer because you do not know who you truly are. Every moment of human life is lived through a single, unexamined assumption. The belief in I. You wake up and immediately think, I am here, I must do this, I must protect myself, I must succeed. This I feels solid, central, and personal. It appears to be the doer of actions, the thinker of thoughts, the experiencer of life. Yet if you look closely, where is it? Can you locate it in the body, in the mind, in sensation, in memory? You can point to the body, but it changes. You can point to thoughts, but they vanish as quickly as they appear. You can point to feelings, but they shift like weather. The I that claims ownership of them is a mirage, an image born of habit, reinforced by language and memory. The Buddha saw through this illusion and called it anatta, non-self. He did not deny existence. He revealed its true nature, process without owner, life without boundary. To cling to the idea of a separate self is to suffer endlessly, because everything that seems to belong to you is destined to dissolve. The mind's greatest fear is its own absence. It trembles at the thought of being nothing, so it invents stories to maintain its identity. It says, I am this body, this gender, this profession, this history. It stitches together fragments of experience and memory into a continuous narrative called me. But between one thought and the next, where is this self? When you fall into deep sleep, where does it go? When you are absorbed in music or wonder, where does it hide? The self appears only when thought returns and claims ownership of experience. It is like a shadow that cannot exist without light, but has no substance of its own. From this illusion of I arise all other forms of suffering. The moment you believe yourself to be a separate entity, you are condemned to defend that entity. You must protect it, prove it, enhance it, and fear its disappearance. Every insult becomes personal, every praise intoxicating, every loss a threat, every gain a temporary relief. The ego lives on comparison, better or worse, superior or inferior, loved or rejected. It cannot survive in unity, it thrives on division. And because life itself is one undivided whole, the ego is forever at war with reality. This is why the Buddha taught that ignorance, not knowing who you are, is the root of suffering. When you identify with the body, you fear death. When you identify with thoughts, you fear being wrong. When you identify with emotions, you swing between elation and despair. But when you see that you are the awareness in which body, thought, and emotion arise, fear begins to dissolve. Awareness cannot die, cannot fail, cannot be diminished. It is not something you own. It is what you are before ownership exists. The realization of non-self is not an intellectual belief. It is a direct seeing. It begins when you observe experience without labeling. Sit quietly and notice sensations, warmth, pressure, breath. Notice thoughts as they come and go. Ask silently, who is aware of this? At first the mind answers with another thought, I am, but look closer. That thought is also seen, so who sees it? Every attempt to find the seer produces another thing that is seen. This inquiry ends not with an answer, but with silence, a vast, open presence in which everything appears and disappears. That silence is your true nature. To the unawakened mind, this truth feels threatening. The ego fears annihilation, believing that without its story, nothing remains. But what remains is everything, the boundless awareness that is life itself. When the illusion of self drops, you do not vanish, you expand beyond boundaries. You discover that the same consciousness that looks through your eyes looks through all eyes. The same life that beats your heart beats in every creature. The walls between me and you, this and that, crumble, revealing the seamless totality the Buddha called tathata, suchness. Suffering arises because the ego resists this unity. It wants to be special, separate, important. It seeks permanence in an impermanent world, identity in a flowing river. Every time it says mine, it tightens the knot of pain. When it loses what it claimed, it grieves. When it gains, it fears losing again. The cycle never ends because the foundation, the I, is unstable. To awaken is not to destroy the ego, but to see through it. Once you see that the self is a thought, not a fact, it loses its tyranny. It still functions in daily life, signing names, playing roles, but it no longer defines you. You use it as a tool rather than being used by it. This understanding transforms every aspect of life. Consider relationships. As long as two egos interact, love becomes a negotiation of needs. I want, you should, I deserve. Each person tries to protect their identity and win validation. But when self-centeredness softens, love becomes natural. You no longer love to complete yourself. You love because you recognize yourself in the other. Compassion replaces possession. You see that hurting another is hurting yourself, and kindness flows effortlessly. The same shift occurs with fear. Fear is the shadow of self. It depends on the idea that there is someone who can be harmed, rejected, or destroyed. But when you look deeply, what you are cannot be harmed. The body may suffer, the mind may tremble, but awareness remains untouched. You have died 1,000 times already. Every night in sleep, every time a version of you changed or disappeared. Yet something constant watches the entire process. When you rest in that constancy, fear loses its grip. The illusion of self also creates time, the psychological time of before and after, what I was and what I will become. The ego lives in this time, always measuring, regretting, planning. But awareness is timeless. It experiences the present as an eternal unfolding. When you dwell in awareness, you live in the now, not as a concept, but as reality. Past and future lose their power to torment you because they are recognized as thoughts arising now. The Buddha often used the metaphor of a flame to describe consciousness. The flame appears continuous, but it is actually a series of momentary combustions. Similarly, what you call self is a chain of momentary processes, sensations, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness, arising and passing with incredible speed. Because they flow smoothly, the illusion of continuity arises, just as a spinning spark appears as a circle of light. Seeing this directly breaks the spell. You realize that there was never an entity moving through time, only life unfolding moment by moment. From this perspective, even death loses its terror. How can something die that was never born as a separate thing? What you call birth and death are only appearances within the endless movement of life. The wave rises, shines in the sunlight, and falls back into the ocean. But the water was never lost. When the identification with the wave ends, the fear of falling disappears. You see that what you truly are, consciousness itself, neither begins nor ends. This realization does not make you detached from life. It makes you intimate with it. Because the boundaries dissolve, everything becomes personal in a new way, not mine but me. The tree, the bird, the stranger on the street, all are expressions of the same life. Compassion ceases to be a virtue and becomes your natural state. You no longer need to force forgiveness, because there is no other left to forgive. You understand why the Buddha smiled at the world. He saw that every being, even those lost in delusion, was already the light they were searching for. Still, this understanding must be lived, not merely thought. The ego can co-opt even spiritual insight, claiming, "I have realized there is no self." This is just another layer of illusion. True seeing leaves no one behind to claim it. It expresses itself quietly in humility, simplicity, and service. The awakened person does not proclaim enlightenment, they embody peace. Their life itself becomes a teaching, effortless, compassionate, free. To approach this realization, begin by observing how the sense of I arises in ordinary experience. When anger flares, notice the thought, "I am angry." Who is this I? Look closer and see that the anger appears in awareness, then fades. Awareness remains. When fear arises, the same inquiry reveals that fear too is transient. When joy arises, it also passes. Only awareness abides. Gradually you begin to sense that you are not inside the body or behind the eyes, but everywhere, the space in which all sensations occur. The body moves within you, not you within it. The more you rest as awareness, the lighter you feel. Problems still come, but they no longer stick. The mind's storms pass quickly because there is nothing for them to hold on to. You respond to life spontaneously rather than reactively, guided by the quiet intelligence of presence. Even in difficulty, a silent joy hums beneath everything, the joy of simply being. This is the joy the Buddha called the taste of freedom. It does not depend on circumstances or achievements. It is your birthright, hidden beneath the illusion of separateness. In deep meditation, when the mind falls silent, you may glimpse this truth directly. There is a moment when thought stops, yet perception continues. Seeing happens, but there is no seer. Hearing happens, but no hearer. Everything functions perfectly without the interference of self. This glimpse, even for a second, changes you forever. You realize that life does not need an owner to be whole. The universe breathes itself, and you are that breath. When you return from such moments, the ego tries to reassert itself, but it has been weakened. Each time you rest in awareness, the false center dissolves a little more. Eventually, the identification breaks completely. Life continues, eating, walking, speaking, but the sense of me doing this vanishes. There is only doing, only being. The old drama of desire and fear fades, replaced by quiet wonder. You do not become someone new. You realize you were never someone at all. This realization does not make you indifferent to the world. On the contrary, it fills you with deep compassion. Seeing that others still suffer in the dream of self, you naturally wish to help. But your help is free of pride or pity. You act because action flows naturally from understanding, not because you expect reward. Whether the world praises or blames you no longer matters. You are free from the need for recognition because the one who needed it has disappeared. To live without the burden of I is to live without constant defense. You no longer take offense because there is no self to protect. You no longer boast because there is no self to inflate. You no longer envy because there is no other to compare. Life becomes simple again, like the innocence of a child who has not yet learned the word mine. In that simplicity, peace returns. The Buddha called this nirvana. Not a distant heaven, but the extinction of the fires of craving, aversion, and delusion. When the illusion of self fades, what remains is indescribable, yet unmistakable. Some call it consciousness, others emptiness, others love. Words fail because language depends on duality, subject and object, and here duality is gone. Yet you know it directly, because it is what you have always been. Even now, as you read these words, awareness is present. It is not something you can find later. It is what is seeing these words. The only reason you overlook it is that you are looking outward. seeking a thing, when what you seek is the seer itself. To wake up is simply to stop overlooking. It is the simplest thing in the world and the hardest, because the mind wants to do it rather than be it. But being is effortless. You don't have to earn it or deserve it. You need only stop pretending to be what you are not. Drop every label: man, woman, sinner, saint, success, failure, and see what remains. What remains is silence, infinite and alive. That silence has never suffered. It watches suffering, but it is untouched. It is the eternal witness the Buddha found under the Bodhi tree, the same witness in you now. When you truly see this, life becomes a dance rather than a burden. The forms still change: joy and sorrow, gain and loss, birth and death. But you are the space in which they occur. You no longer cling to any of them. You participate fully, yet remain free. This is what freedom means in Buddhism. Not escape from the world, but freedom within it. The chains were never outside. They were made of thought and identification. Once those dissolve, even ordinary life shines with extraordinary light. In the end, all teachings, all practices, all words point to this: know yourself. Not the self that comes and goes, but the selfless awareness that has never left. The journey of awakening is not about becoming spiritual or perfect. It is about remembering what you already are. You are not the wave struggling to survive. You are the ocean expressing itself in infinite waves. You are not a separate soul climbing toward heaven. You are heaven unfolding here and now. When you live from this understanding, suffering becomes impossible in the old sense. Pain may visit, but you no longer take it personally. Loss may come, but you see it as movement within wholeness. Even death appears as a return to what never left. The fear of non-existence dissolves because you recognize that non-existence is impossible. Existence is all there is, and you are that. To see this clearly, even once, is to be forever changed. The rest of life becomes a deepening of that seeing, a gradual surrender of old habits, until only awareness remains. This is the end of the path, yet also its beginning, for awakening is not a final destination, but a way of being. Each breath, each step, each interaction becomes sacred because you know it as yourself. You suffer because you forget this truth. You mistake the reflection for the face, the echo for the song, the shadow for the light. The Buddha's compassion lies in reminding you again and again, you are not what you think you are. You are not broken, not lacking, not lost. You are the consciousness in which all appearances rise and fall. When this is seen, even suffering reveals its purpose, to push you back to what you have always been. When the illusion ends, life continues just as before, yet everything is different. The world is no longer a battlefield but a miracle. Every face is your own, every sound is your heartbeat, every sunrise whispers the same truth. You were never separate. You were never incomplete. You were never born and will never die. You are the eternal now, watching itself in endless forms. If this message helped you see yourself more clearly, subscribe to the channel and continue exploring Buddhist wisdom to awaken the peace that has always lived within you.